Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Bava Kama Daf Nun Beis. We are going to begin on Nun Aleph Amud Beis, about 10 lines from the bottom, maybe even more than that. Of our love Harishon V'Kisahu. So this is a quote from our Mishnah on the previous Amud. It says that when it comes to a person who has a boar of two partners, and we were discussing how it's possible to have that situation. Overall of a rishon. So let's say the first person walked by, he didn't cover it up, because the second guy was still using it. He still, let's say, was watering his animals. Vasheni loki sahu, the second guy didn't, so then the sheni is chayiv. Again, the logic is that the first person could have covered up, but he didn't because he saw that the second guy was still there and he was anticipating that he was going to do it instead. So let's see the Gemara on this. Again, Avralav Harishan lo kisahu. Harishan me'emas miftar. The question is, when do we say that this first person is completely potter? So Rashi says, Di'i kiriktani masnisen sha'avru shnehem zerchazeh. It would be just simply the case where the first guy left and the second guy was still there. Amai Rishon Potter Harigamhu Pasha. According to Rashi, he feels, based on the kasha, that this person is still negligent. He could have covered it up, he didn't. So therefore he should also be perhaps liable, is the way that he frames the question. So in this, the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says the following answer. If I can find where we are. Okay, so again, Varisha Meimos Mifter. So Rabbi Yosef, they both say Mishmei the Rabba Baruchana, the armor that they said Mishmei the Rebbe Mani. Chado Imer, one says, when is this first guy potter? Is Mishimanichoi Mishtamish, is when he basically is done using this pit. B'chad Imer Mishi Yimser Lo Dilyoy. It's when he basically gave over the drawing water. So that is the question. Again, when exactly is this person potter? So Dilyoi is referring to the kisui habor, the actual cover, the manhole, if you will, says Rashi. Lachasoisoi, sharishin paschoi, the first one opened it up. Vidolan, he, let's say, lifted and filled up water. Vasheni umatza, and the second guy, their partners, he saw that it was already open. Umasal arishan is kisei habor, and the second guy was almost handed over the baton. This again, let's call it some type of like a manhole or something which covers up the pit. So either he's potter as soon as he's done using it, or only once he actually physically hands this. Like a tanoi. This actually perhaps is based on a machlokas tanoim. It says as follows: Hamidal v'mayim in a bor. A person who is removing water from a pit, uva chaveroi, and his friend comes, v'ermul hanachli, leave it for me, vani ad l'mayim. I also want water, so leave it open so this way I can get water. So kivan shanichoi mishtamish potter. As soon as he's done using it, the first person is potter. So if someone afterwards falls into this pit, so the second guy is chayiv. And sounds a lot like what we said before. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov oimer mishiyim dilyoy. It's from when he gives the cover to him. So sounds literally identical to what we said before. So b'may kimifki. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov savar yesh breira. So according to him, he holds that there is breira, which basically means you can figure things out. Hai mididei kamamale, that this one is filling up his water. V'hai mididei kamali, and this other person is filling up his water. V'rabbanan savri ein breira, and the Rabbanan will hold that ein breira. So basically, what ended up happening over here is the first guy gave the cover to the second guy, as he decided to also draw water. Now the first guy can leave, and it's the responsibility of the second guy to cover the hole. Now, if you hold yesh breira, so each partner has their own ownership of the water that they take. And therefore, even though it's one big massive amount of water. However, when you scoop up your water from that well, so it's like when it was already down there, that was already designated as your specific water. So therefore, because of that, you need to give the cover in that case if you hold the yesh brera. Why? Because otherwise, you are still responsible for your part of the pit, since the partner only needed to watch his part and you your part. It's very interesting. So therefore, you actually physically have to give him the lid because yesh brera. Because yesh brera, so each part of that pit is like split. So it's not that the second person has to watch your half, if you will, of the water. So therefore, that's how this is understood. So we look in Rashi, v'hai medidei kemamale. Each person is lifting up their own water. V'lo havi leisheni shoyel al chelkai. And therefore, it's the second person is not like a borrower of the chelk of the rishon. Sheikul mutal level shomer, that the second person has to watch the entire thing. Hilkach, if you would hold ein breyer, that's what you would say. He's like a shomer for the whole thing. And therefore, as soon as the first person is masalik, he removes himself from drawing water, so that all of a sudden the second person is responsible for the entire thing. However, you hold the yesh breyer, hilkach im hizik shneim chayavim. Of a muscle loss and delay, once he gives over the cover, nasa zeh shomer shekibul level chasaisai. So now he's a shomer to cover the whole thing up. That's how this is understood. So let's look at question 11. Bor shel shnei shutvin. To use the spit, a masai nifter rishon meniske habor imo kiso sheni uma hatamze. So let's see how he writes it. Rabbi Yosef, is that who is Rabbi Ben Yaakov? He says, Rabbi Ben Yaakov says, it's all in Rashi Tevis over here. So according to him, it's only mishpshul adelia. It's only once you give over the actual cover. Rabbanan, it's even mishanichol mishtamish when you're done using it. Give it in breira havile sheni shayil alakol v'chay b'shmirasai. So that's that, which may be the same question as TA9. Let's see. Bor shel shnei shutvan amar rishon hasheni chay masay nichnas hasheni tachas rishon v'chay v'koil. So again, that's really the same question in some machlokas. V'ha'im chayuvo medin shayil or medin shaymer. So that's as we saw in Rashi. So if you hold ein breira, so then he's like a shayil. However, once you give over the cover, he's a din of a shaymer. So it's a little bit of a difficult, and I wrote not a clear question, and I tend to believe that that's true, but nonetheless, that is the question. Nun al Lamed Beis, that was TA9. Okay. Good. Weiter. So let's continue. Oimer Ravina. So Ravina says, V'avdo tamayu. They actually go in according to their reason, did not. We're in the Mishnah. Hashutvin, when it comes to partners, Shinadr Hanaz Zemizeh, some really nice partners, they say, I don't have anything to do with each other. So, Asurin Lechanis HaChatzer. You're not allowed to enter into each other's courtyard because you're getting Hana by going to their Chatzer. Now, since they're partners, maybe you should say that I'm going into my own portion of the Chatzer. So, it must be a breira. And therefore, high lidinafshe ayil, the high lidinafshe ayil. You're right. I'm not getting any hana from you, but I can get hana from my own things. So since I'm a partner with you, so therefore we can say yesh breira, that the part that I walked on was mine. Rabbanan said in breira, therefore you can't walk in that area. Okay. Omer Abelazar, a person who sells a pit to his friend, again, once he's given over the lid, kana. At that point, the buyer is kind of the pit. So what exactly is going on over here? If you gave money, so you can be kind of things with money. If the person did a chazaka, so you should be kind of that way, because we know that when it comes to karka can be kind, as Rashi says, with kesef shtar chazaka, as we saw in Masechtas Kedusha not too long ago. So what's the whole problem over here? Why do you have to give a lid? So chazaka. So if it's chazaka, so why do you have to give him a lid? So boil meimar, and he needs to say boil meimar. He has to say to him le chazikni. Once he gives him the lid, So even though you're supposed to say this magic formula of go and be kainit lech chazakukani, however, once you give the lid, even though you don't actually say that lech chazakukani, it's still a kinyan. But technically speaking, if you would have done a chazaka and said lech chazakukani, that would work. Or maybe Yeshua ben Levi. As we continue to Nun Beis Amud Aleph, the person sells his house to his friend. So which is very similar to the Gemara in Pesachim when it comes to who's the owner of the property. If you rent a property before Pesach, someone who has the keys. So once you give the keys over, now the new buyer is the owner of the house. So same kasha. If you gave money, you can be kind of a house with money or chazaka. So you have to say that lashon. Once you give a key, it's almost like kni. It's like a tongue twister. So you gave the key. It's like you said like chazaku kni, dami. Reish Lakish said the name of Rabbi Yana the following. A person sold a flock of animals to his friend. Kivan shemasaloi mashkuchis kana. As soon as you give over the mashkuchis, so what is that? So Rashi says that's l'kamei mefarish. It's going to be explained later on, soon actually. That's a davar hamoishech kol ha'eder acharav. It's something which causes all the animals to be drawn after it. So we'll see what that is exactly. So hechadam again, iba mashicha. We know that you can be kind of metaltalin or animals with mashicha. So you pull it, so like them in mashicha. Iba masira, like them in masira. Again, this is all stipulated in Masechtas Kedushin. So if that's the case, as Rashi iba masira kani lahu shahi rishas harabim mochatzer sheinu shel shneim shein mashicha kainasham. So why Masira? Because sometimes you can't do Mashicha, for example, in a Rishas Harabim or a Chatzar which doesn't belong to both of them. The in Mashicha el b'simta or b'chatzar shel shneihem. Mashicha doesn't work in all places. It has to be either in a simta, which is not exactly Rishas Harabim. It has certain properties of this quasi domain, or a Chatzar shel shneihem. So therefore, you have to do Masira sometimes. So the question is, what's the whole notion of having to give over the mashkuchis? So ayom b'mashicha u'bayil meimerle lech mashaychu kani. You have to say that lashon. Kivan damaselo mashkuchis. Once you give over this thing, command yermele lech mashaychu kani dami. So my mashkuchis. We keep saying the same word a billion times, but what does it mean? What exactly are you giving over? So hacha tirgamu karkashta. Okay, hopefully that'll help you. What's a karkashta? Rashi says garsin and zug. Shemekarkesh bolifnei eder v'hoylach kul acharav. There's some special bell, like you ring a bell, that all these animals, upon hearing this particular sound, sounds like Pavlov. Once you hear the sound of this bell ringing, then all of a sudden they start coming. So that's the thing that was given over. Rav Yaakov Omer Iza the Azal Bereish Edra. If you have a goat that goes in the head in front of all of the flock, that is what it's talking about. It says Rashi, Yeshlo Baal Ha'eder Eiz Charif, a very wise goat. V'derech Ha'ez Mahalach Barosh, they usually go ahead. Va'eder Hoyach Achreim. So it could be a bell, it could be also some other type of an animal that leads the other animals. Kidid Darish Hahu Galilah, as was explained by this Galilean, all of the Rav Chisda Kad Paz Ragiz. This is referring to when the shepherd Ragiz Ra'ayo, when the shepherd would get upset, Al Ana Avid Lenagda Samuta, then he pokes out its eyes of this goat. What does that mean? Says Rashi, it hurts its eyes, and it stumbles, and it falls into pits. The Eder Achareh, and the flock will go after it. Kach kishahamakam nifra misayni Yisrael doesn't mean literally it's this. It's an analogy that just like Nifra Misani Yisrael Mimeno Lahim Parnosim She'enim Huganim. So too when it comes to the Sani Yisrael, that they go after livelihoods which are not proper. So it doesn't mean literally doing this, but it means that if you yourself as a leader do things which are not proper, everyone's going to follow you, and also things which are not proper as well. Perhaps that's the meaning of that analogy. Let's see the next Mishnah. Says the Masnisa, Ki sahu harishain. So the first person covered up because he was using it, and he covered the pit, and that was it for him. Uva sheni, the second person comes, umatza magula, and he finds that somehow, because he wanted to use this pit, he found that it was open. Viloki sahu, and he didn't cover it up. So sheni chayiv. In that situation, the second person is chayiv. So how is that possible? In fact, this is a reality. We know for a fact the first person covered it up. So Rashi says, maybe it was wormy and it broke. This covering wasn't so good. And then, so even though it was like an inferior cover, but it was covered. So even though it broke, and that's why it's open, and the second guy just didn't do anything. He didn't cover it up. So the second person is chayiv, and the first one is potter, which is a big chiddush, says Rashi, of a loki sol rishain. Let's say the first person didn't do anything. Uva sheni umatz megula loki sol shnehen chayavim. So it's interesting. According to the way Rashi's diak is that the only reason why only the second person is chayiv, but not the first one, because the first guy at least did cover it up, but if the first person didn't cover it up, and the second guy also didn't, then they're both responsible. Okay, kisahu karoi. Let's say it was covered up properly. Says Rashi, ve'avrulav hashor or chamor v'nafel mace. Somehow an ox came and it fell into it and died. V'nafel hashor or chamor umeis potter. So the Gemara is going to ask, how is that? How do we understand it? That if in fact it was properly covered up, how did this animal fall in? It doesn't make any sense. It was covered up, so that couldn't have happened. So we have to understand that, which Rashi points out. Lo kisahu karoi. Let's say it was not covered up properly. So it has to be, for you to be potter, is only if it was covered up properly. If it wasn't covered up properly, then you're going to be chayiv. Okay, continue in the Mishnah. Nafal lefanav. Let's say it fell face forward. Mikoil hachriya, from the banging of tools. Chayiv. However, lacharav, if let's say the animal fell backwards, mikol hakriya, from the banging of the tools, then potter. So we see this distinction. If the animal falls face forward, then you will be chayiv. If it falls backwards, you're going to be potter. Let's look at this Rashi. Nafal afana mikol hakriya, bor karuya, it was a dug a pit, the nichnas kaira sacher, and there was a person doing construction. There was a construction worker actually in the pit. V'hirchiv olahamik, and he was trying to make it wider or deepening it. He was banging and doing some construction in the pit. V'shah holech al svasabor. So the animal was coming by. V'shama koil hapatish, and it heard the banging of this construction worker in the hole. V'nivas, it got frightened. V'nafal upon the babor chayiv bahabor. So in that situation, the Baal Bor is going to be chayiv if it fell face forward. Skipping a few lines, Lashon Acher, V'kaira is Grama Ba'almahu Da'avad. It's only considered to be a Grama. Okay, why? Maybe that's the reason why you're going to be Potter, Lacharav, then why you're going to be chayiv Lafanav. Okay, so anyway, that's a little bit of an insight exactly what happened based on this. So the Mishnah. Okay, Nafal Seichashar V'Kelav. Vinishtabroi. Let's say the ox fell into it, and it's the shore and the vessels. So the din is, and it broke. So chamor v'kelav, or let's say you have a donkey and its kalim came, viniskaru, and it got crushed. So chayil behema patel kalim. As we've mentioned before, I'm just going to explain this, that when it comes to kalim, are usually patel babor. So therefore, they're only going to be chayiv on the animal that got damaged, but not the kalim. Novel seichashar chayre sheit v'katan chayiv. Interesting. that if you have an animal, which we're going to have to understand this in the Gemara, which is a cher shel katan, which l'chayr that means of. You would think it means of, not that it's referring to the animal itself. The Gemara is going to explain this. Chayiv. Bain obas, eved o amma, potter, says Rashi Kloimer. Alpha gav the katanim hain, even though they're small and young, vleika meimar, and you can't say iboyle nui mazel, then you should have been more careful if you'll hachi potter. Mixeris akasav shor v'loy adam, chamor v'loy kalim. So it's only when an ox falls in, but not a person. Only if a chamor falls in and not kalim. So as we said, you're potter by kalim, but you're also potter when it comes to Adam. Even though, again, they're little kids, you can think, well, a katan maybe is an exception. Okay, a gadol, if they fall in, you're going to be potter. The baal bor is going to be potter because he should have, he should have been more careful. A katan, a ben, a bas is not going to be necessarily so careful. Maybe they can be chayiv. So the chiddush of the Mishnah is that the pasuk just says, this gzeres hakasiv, regardless if it's even a katan, that it's shor v'lo Adam. All right, let's see the Gemara. Varishain ad amos mifter. So very similar to as we framed it before, we in the previous Amud. So we said that the first person is going to be potter and the second one is going to be chayiv. In the case of the Reish of the Mishnah, where the first person did cover it up and the second person found it opened up because again maybe it was the cover was wormy and it broke. The second guy should have covered it up. He didn't. Therefore, the second guy's chayiv, the first guy's potter. But when? So Amarav bichdei shiyeda. From the amount of time that he should have known, says Rashi, Shiyavu gam harishain acharikain v'yirenu megula. From the time that the first person came afterwards and noticed it was open, hoyel shneim yoidim shehu megula ram yechiyuva tervayu. So if there was enough time where the first guy could have come back and should have come back and did come back, it's exactly what that means. So Taisus actually says, Taisus is helpful over here. Taisus says, Kalemer shakol yetzi shabur megula. The mastama shama. He said, interestingly enough, that this is not small news, apparently, an open pit. Right? This is big news. So it probably got back to him. And therefore, he should have had enough time to, if he had enough time to be able to go back, he's high. But since the amount of time was so limited for him to be able to have heard about it and come back, that's the reason why he's going to be potter up until that short window of time. Shmuel Omer b'chtei shiyoidiuhu. The amount of time that he was informed that that we informed the first guy that his pit was uncovered. This is obviously a shorter time. So you had to. It wasn't that someone went to him. That's one din. As soon as he finds out about it, or even though he found out about it, he's still going to be potter until he could actually come back and do something about it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar b'chtei shiyoidiuhu. So he says it's the amount of time that he was informed. V'yiskar po'alim, he could hire workers. V'yichros arozim v'yichasenu, and he can cut some cedars and create basically a new covering for this pit. Kiso karoi v'nafel sachashar chamor umeis potter. So the pit was perfectly covered. It was solid, strong, and then an ox came and fell into it. So you're potter. So the question is, what does that mean? Kivan di kisahu karoi hechi nafal. It doesn't make sense. If in fact it was covered properly, then how is it shaykh that an animal fell into it? How do we understand that? So Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Chana, it's shietliya mitocho, that it got wormy from the inside, and therefore because of that, that's how it broke, because it was wormy and it was mekalkel from the inside. So he covered it up perfectly and it looked fine, but from the inside it was actually not such a great cover. Iboilhu, Fret the Gemara. Kisahu kisui shiachal amid b'fnei shvarim v'yachal amid gemalim. So you can have a cover which is pretty strong that even an ox stepping on it, nothing will happen. But let's say it's not strong enough for camels, which apparently camels, I guess, are bigger than oxen. Well, it must be the case. Heavier. So, again, the animal that it was a good shmira for, a good cover for, was only for oxen, but not for a camel. The asu gamolim, and camels came. The eruha, and it made it shaky or weak, but it didn't fall. Then the also shvarim enafel bei mai. And then oxen came, even though if the camel didn't come, it would have been fine. But the camel came and kind of ruined it a little bit. Not so much that the camel fell, but enough that it ruined it a little bit, so that when the oxen came later, they fell into it. So, again, Rashi says, Di'in naflu be gamalim. If, let's say, the camels themselves fell in, lo meboyulan, that's not even a kasha. Now, obviously, in that situation, the chayev, the hagabli gamalim poishehu, because this is not considered to be an adequate covering when it comes to for a camel. And therefore, if the camel actually went on this lid and it fell, then obviously you're going to be chayev for the damages of the camel. That's not what happened. So the question is, are you chayev when the ox now is damaged? So Amri hechidami, what exactly is going on over here? If there's a whole bunch of camels roaming around the street, then poishehu, because you knew that either a camel is going to fall or it's going to severely damage this, and therefore even an ox won't be able to withstand it afterwards. But there's not a lot of oxen around, there's not a lot of camels around, so then you would not have anticipated it. Therefore you should be potter. Well, the camels come, but not always. It's only on certain times. So where it says mi amrina and kivan de asin leprakim poishehu. So what do you mean? So this is the question. Mi amrina and kivan de asin leprakim. Since it comes sometimes poishehu, you're negligent because you kind of knew camels do once in a while come over here. Di boili asuki adait. They should have in your mind. This is a possibility. Odima kivan de hashtamias leka. There's no animals around here. There's no camels around here. Onasu. So that's the question. Okay. So Toshma. Kisau Kuroi, so maybe we effort the Shaila based on our Mishnah. It's or this Brisa. Kisau Kuroi Mishnah. Right? Kisau Kuroi, you covered up properly. Benavol Seicha Shor Chamor, Mace Potter. So Hechadami, Ilim Kuroi, Lishvarim Kuroi Lukamalim, say Hechinafel. It doesn't make any sense. You covered up properly. So if you covered up properly, that's so strong that even a camel's not going to fall through it, not going to do any damage. So then how's it shaykh that this shore fell through it? It wouldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened. It's not practical. It means you did it properly, strong enough only for the oxen who continue to do bez and bez. However, it's not strong enough for the camels, like our question. Now the idishlichi gamalim amay pater poshehu, the idishlichi gamalim shita onasu. So again, it can't be these two extremes. Elolav must be exactly what Tommy, the asal prokim, that the camels do come once in a while. The asagamal and the camels did come. The aruha, and they weakened the lid. The asa shvarim, then ox came with Uffalbay. The katani potter, and our Mishnah says in this case, your potter salma kivan the hash the lake onasu. So therefore, maybe that's the case of our Mishnah. Really, it was strong even for camels. So if it's strong for camels, then how did an ox fall in it? But it could kashal novel. Amar Yitzchak Barbar Chana Shitlia Mitaychai. As we said before, that it was rotten on its own. So it's not that it got weakened by the camel, because the truth is it would have been strong for the camel from the outside, but it got rotten on its own, and therefore that's the reason why you're going to be potter. Okay, let's slow down for a second and look at question. Maybe let's hold off, okay? Because it's gonna be the same question. Let's just keep going. Toshma, there's very little Rashi here. Loki sahu karoi. Let's say you did not cover it properly. V'nafal asaycha shor chamor umeis chayev, which is the second part of our Mishnah. Now hechidami. It was a very weak cover. So pshita. Of course you're gonna be chayev. You put some aluminum foil as a cover, so an ox is going to fall right through it. Doesn't mean anything. It's not a cover, right? So that can't be the case, because that's a dover plush you'd be chayev. El lav gamolim. It must be that it was strong enough for oxen, but not for camel. So same question. El lav, it must be this middle ground. The aslan prokim, that camels come once in a while. The yasa gamolim, and the camels came. The yeruhu, and weakened it. The yasa shvar v'nafal, and then the ox fell into it. But katani chayev. So we actually see pumfakert. Alma kivan di asla prakim. The fact that these camels do come every so often, peshehu, this guy is negligent. He should have thought about this as a possibility that camels do once in a while come here. It says camels do sometimes come here, so therefore din is you're going to be chayiv. So therefore it's a raya the other way. No, really, it's only strong for oxen, but not for camels. And camels are all over the place. So what do you mean? If camels are always around, you're a posheya. Certainly, your chayiv should be double portion. So you're right. It's not really much of a chiddush. I didn't know. It's a reisha kiso karoi. Not to say v'nami loy kiso karoi. It's not necessarily right. Ikadi amri. So here's the lashon acher, which is the reason why I didn't want to do question 12 yet, because this is another interpretation. So hanami vadeloi boilan. This question that we just framed is not a kasha. Certainly, according to the second lashon, you definitely are negligent. Okay. So what was the question? If that wasn't the question, because that question is obvious that you'd be chayiv. Ki boilan hechehudi boilan. Ki boilan hachi hudi boilan. The question, this is the question. Similar case that you had a cover that was enough to hold oxen, but not for camels. There's camels all over the place, which in that itself you would think you're a posheya and you should be chayiv. However, the hitliya mitocho mahu. So it wasn't damaged by a camel. Had they, the camel gone there, it would have ruined the lid. Instead, the lid got wormy, and that's how the lid got weak. And the shore stepped on it, and it broke. It wasn't from the camel, even though shlichi gamolim. No camel went on this lid. It just became very wormy itself. So mahu mi amrinin migu da havi pashe etzel gamolim havi pashe namu inin hatlaw. Do we say that since you were already posheya, that there's a whole bunch of camels over here? Got lucky, no camels actually went on this lid, but since you're not careful for that, so therefore we're going to say that you're chayiv the fact that it got wormy on its own, or ruined or weakened on its own. So tashma kiso kuroi. So we use the same cases. Kiso kuroi covered up properly with naflo seichashar chamor meis potter. The idmor lo Rabbi Yitzchak bar Merchana shitliya matoichai. So he said, what was that case? Why is it that you're potter? Is because even though you covered up properly, so how did the animal fall in it? Is because it was wormy, and yet it says you're potter. Now, hechedami. Is so rock solid, the potter. May you have a lemevid, right? It was, you did everything you could have. You made it so it was, and there was a lot of camels around, but that's why you made a lid which was strong enough for camels. It turns out that there was something internally wrong with the manufacturer that made a mistake. Really, it's because the lid was only somewhat strong. It was only enough to withstand an ox, but not a camel. There's a whole bunch of camels. We don't say the migoy. That even though it's true, you were posheya because there's a lot of camels around, but since the camel is not the one that damaged it, but was because of this worminess on its own, so therefore you're going to be potter because we don't say migu. So therefore it's a riot. Really, this is a rock solid, strong, amazing lid. And therefore, you didn't do anything wrong. You did everything right. So then, why do we need to mention that you're potter in this case? It's a double portion. So, that maybe you should have gone and stepped on it. Kamashmalon. In other words, says Rashi, tadir, you should have constantly been banging on it. Hitting it with your foot. B'koyach, with your strength, lived like shlot hitliya. So maybe you should have done extra examinations above and beyond what a person would do, just in case there was something wrong with this lid. Kamashmon, you're still potter even though you didn't do that. Tashma, Loki sohakroi. Let's say you did not cover it properly. There's Elam lo karol shemar lo karol gamalim was something very weak. So shriich lameim or the chayiv. Of course you're chayiv. You put an inferior lid. El olav karol shemar lo karol gamalim. It was only strong enough for shmar but not for gamalim. The idish shriich gamalim, as we said, poshehu. Obviously you're gonna be chayiv. The idolo shriich gamalim anasu. If there's never a camel that's around, it was a once in a million thing. So then it's an inus if it happened, and you'd be potter. So why do we say Rechaim? It can't be that case. Elav the shchich gemalim really must be that gemalim do come. So if that's true, then you're a posheya for the gemalim. But that's not what ended up happening. The camels didn't step on it. The italiyah b'toichai, it was just something in wrong with it in self. It's v'gatani chayev. Alma amrinan migu the havi b'shela inin gemalim havi b'shela inin hatawah. So we do say the migui. So it's around the other way around. Ari lo oilam karel shemam lokat v'loi. Really, this lid was only strong enough for oxen, but not for camels. There's a whole bunch of camels that are here. The asu gemalim, and the camels taka came. The asu gemalim, they did come. The eruhu, and they're the ones that weakened it. The asu shvarim, and then the oxen came. The naflbei and fell. Kashalach pshita pashehu. Obviously, if there's all these oxen around, there's never pashi should be chayiv. So again, it doesn't mean necessarily we have to say as a chiddush over here. It's an I did not say reishiki so kodoi not to say vanami loki so. Just to remain consistent, we say the opposite way, but not necessarily as the chiddush. Tashma. Naful soichai shor chere shoit v'katan. Now, pashtit, what the Mishnah is talking about is the ox was deaf. It was a deaf ox, or an ox which was a shaita, or an ox which was a katan, or a suma, blind. Or it's going at night. So chayiv, in these cases, the Baal Habor is going to be chayiv if all these different types of animals fell in. Pikeach, let's say you have an animal which is a pikeach, umahalach b'yoim, and Rashi says, and it went during the day and fell, potter. So my name, why don't we say Menhavi Poshel in el Cherish, that you're considered to be a Poshel regarding a deaf ox, Havi Nami Poshel in Pikech. Elav Shmamino, Amrin Migoi Shmamino. So this is actually the raya that we don't say Migoi. Just because in one situation you say you're Poshea, but if something else happens in a different situation, we're not going to say Migoi, you're going to be Chayv in that case as well. We don't find that you're Chayv in the case of a Pikech, Mahalach B'yoim. And therefore, why not? You should say Migu. So the answer is we don't say Migu here, and we don't say Migu there either. And therefore, the fact is, even though it's true, you are pushing regarding Gemalim, but since the reason why the ox fell in had nothing to do with the Gemalim was because of a Hitliyah, Matoichai, so therefore you are going to be Potter. Question 12. We're going to stop there. Let's just get this question good. So you covered it. It was only able to withstand oxen, but not camels. Uba Gemalim, and camels came. V'eruhu, and it weakened it. V'shvarim naflu, and ox fell. Mahadin. So according to the first Lashon, okay, let's go slow. If the shchichi rabim, you're chayiv. If you're not shchichi Gemalim, you're potter. However, what happens is asin liprakim. So for the first Lashon, it was in Iboya Delishita. We didn't have an answer. But the second one, we said that's a davar pasha going to be chayiv, and the whole question was something else. T A10. Iboya Gisokis is the asu gamal and the ru oi hitliya the asu shmar menaflu be mahu ma study hasafik lashon lishna kam lishna basra. This is a hard question. Really, it's not just enough. It's like, what's the iboy of the question of this way? So you could either say, do you say migo? I can say the first lashon ari ba'asu gamolim aprakim. They come sometimes, and the suffix iboyle lasuki daite should have been thought about it. V'havi poishea or you poishea the akati onasu or yoloin oinus. The second is no. It's talking about shchich gamolim. However, it broke because of it was wormy, not because of the camels. And do we say migu to havi b'shea gemalim havi b'shea hatlaw? Again, not a simple question. That was TA10, which is the question. Again, do we say Kivan de asign leprakim poishehu. Diboy asuki daita odilma kivan de hashdemia lake onosu. So it's really this. And then over here, TA10 is mi amrin and migu de havi poishe etzel gemolim havi poisheya namil inin hatlo dimul amrin and migu. So that's the second. TB 11. For some reason, I'm not getting questions over here. Okay, TB 13. I have to go back and see where these other questions are. Shor pikeach shenafel labor mace hayim chayab al habor. So it's over here. I'm assuming this is all it is. Pikeach mahalach b'yoyim potter. So it's all totally. If it was during the day, then the Baal Bor is going to be potter. If it was at night, then the Baal Bor is going to be chayiv. Let's see what he writes. B'layil chayiv b'yoyim potter. Well, I missed two other questions. Let's see questions 11 and 12. Let's do 12 first. Shor v'adam shedach v'adam labor v'huzik. You have a shor and an adam that pushed a person to a pit and he got damaged. Le'enin ma amrina b'gemara sharaka adam chayiv. Le'enin ma raka shor chayiv. So again, I don't remember maybe doing it. Le'enin dal devarim chutz min nezek raka adam chayiv. Le'enin kaifer v'shloishim shel eved raka shor chayiv. And then question 11, Bor b'shus rabim ha'im yesh nafkim min bein nafel afanav ol acharav mastan mezeh. So we do mention this in the Mishnah, right? That nafel afanav chayiv la'acharav mikol kriyas potter. Let's see what he writes over here. L'ra potter bin nafel acharav deleka havala. L'shmuel ein nafkim min b'derech nefil also kivan shechayiv af b'chavata. So we talked it already. Adkan.